Critical alert. Unknown human warship has crossed into Trelver exclusion zone. Panic erupted in alien command posts that were now sifting through the area for any clues. Most laughed at a lone Terran ship daring to cross the galaxy's most heavily defended threshold, but one or two felt a nagging dread creeping in. For thousands of years, the Alien Dominion had set the terms for galactic expansion. With their powerful jump gates, fortress planets, and tight territorial limits, the Alien had little need or desire to negotiate. Their sprawling empire covered hundreds of star systems, each guarded by fleet and powerful ships armed with superheated plasma cannons and near-impenetrable energy shields. They constructed a civilization based on discipline, technology, and control. At the heart of their hold on power was the Trelver exclusion zone, a sector of space ruled to be hazardous to any vessel not in Dominion service. These outer worlds had long made up a sort of fortress ring guarding the Dominion's core worlds, keeping even the most ruthless outsiders from approaching the Dominion's seat of power. Crossing this line without express permission was viewed as an act of aggression. Nobody had dared cross it for centuries. The Dominion's powerful patrol fleets and advanced sensor nets assured that trespassers were detected and rapidly destroyed. Humanity, on the other hand, was a small but successful species in a small star cluster. For centuries, Earth and its colonies had steadily grown, dabbling in interstellar trade, forging alliances with smaller star nations. The Dominion, dismissing these short-lived bipeds as little to worry about, granted them only slim trading rights and denied them access to important lanes. Humans had neither the numbers nor the technology to compete, Dominion analysts concluded. In fact, human vessels, and human ships were relatively agile, did not have the sheer numbers or weaponry of Dominion dreadnoughts. Serviceable frigates, cruisers, and carriers were manufactured on Earth. But none of this rivaled the apex-level Dominion engineering. And humans, for their part, knew they had no chance against a full-on Dominion invasion. Diplomatic overtures and modest tributes maintained a fragile peace. But in dark underbellies of the Terran Federation, there were some voices unwilling to resign themselves to second-class status. Secretly, the brightest minds of Earth toiled away, designing prototypes for advanced warp drives, shielding systems, and peculiar weapons. They salvaged and spied for scraps of Dominion tech. And, over the decades, those components coalesced into something amazing. One warship meant to take advantage of every Dominion blind spot. That gamble ultimately led to the building of the HSS Indomitable, a Terran dreadnought said to contain stealth fields, quantum lance artillery, and an AI-controlled tactical suite. It was a radical departure from mainstream Earth fleets. Many in the Federation Council considered such a vessel a reckless overreach. But to a small faction, the Indomitable was humanity's ticket to reshaping the galactic order. With rumors of the Indomitable's existence quietly circulating among Earth's allies, however, few really believed it would be deployed at all, much less attempt something as suicidal as penetrating the Trelver exclusion zone. The Dominion also dismissed any chance the Terrans would court open warfare. But those assumptions were upended the day Dominion vanguards registered a rogue jump signature just inside the border of the exclusion zone. Initially, the Dominion's orbital posts attributed it to a sensor glitch, perhaps wandering pirates or a rogue drone. But then the signature continued, distinctly Terran in origin. Alarm klaxons blared. Critical alert. Human warship detected entering restricted space. There was confusion across Dominion channels. Standard alien arrogance meant they thought the incursion was no big deal, something local patrols could easily manage. But behind the scenes, some Dominion strategists were unsettled. As it turned out, humans were also very good at improv. If they really had a new warship, that could make the Dominion's usual response more complicated. And yet, official briefings continued to sound confident. Not even the most advanced Terran ship could break the heart of the exclusion zone with any sort of regularity. They would be herded, interrogated, and then killed or taken prisoner. Meanwhile, on the HSS Indomitable, Captain Naomi Yates studied the sensor readouts in silence. She was a low-key presence with graying hair and sharp hazel eyes, a veteran of lesser border conflicts. Her task, to command a hand-picked crew of Terran specialists on a mission that, if successful, would show that humanity would not be caged. They had leapt into Dominion territory with a clear, audacious goal, a risky one that could tilt the balance of power if they succeeded. The stakes were astronomical. If the Indomitable was discovered too early or stopped, it would pave the way for the Dominion's vengeance on Earth, and inevitably to a war they couldn't win. But in the event that Yates and her team got past the maze of Dominion defenses, pulled off the covert op that they had planned and got to safety, the entire galaxy was going to see the dawn of a new era of Terran audacity. Meanwhile, on the Dominion's capital planet, Elion Prime, admirals gathered in the Great Strategic Hall, inspecting preliminary data on the Terran incursion. A few called for the immediate mobilization of the Third Fleet. Others said a neighborhood patrol wing would be enough. Ultimately, a middle ground emerged: send moderate forces to intercept and gather intelligence, and destroy the incursion when needed. The Empire's formal response: no crisis, just a curiosity, an overambitious Terran vessel that had picked the worst path for its pathless adventure. Little did they know, the Indomitable was already traveling the sublanes, hiding its signature and avoiding detection, threading its way through the countless sublanes. An unauthorized vessel had breached the Dominion's most heavily guarded frontier for the first time in centuries. As battle stations activated across the exclusion zone's perimeter and hungry Dominion captains thirsty to eliminate the Terran threat lined up to do just that, a feeling of creeping tension crept in. The humans had never moved so boldly. Why now? And more important yet, what were they really after that was worth tempting almost certain annihilation by taking up residence in the Lion's Den? For centuries, the Trelver Exclusion Zone, an interstellar spider web of sensor buoys, stealth satellites, and heavily armed patrol cruisers, had proved an impregnable refuge from trespass. Incursions, of any kind, would usually send up alarms and quickly get neutralized. But now its unacknowledged Terran signature roamed farther and farther, baffling the Dominion's central command. Far at the zone's rim, at Station Kothar, a strategic outpost, Lieutenant Vrolk studied the scanner feed, their alarm mounting. One contact appeared and disappeared, like it had some fancy cloaking. They were unable to triangulate its position. Attempts to do so generated contradictory data. Could we be facing a sensor glitch? He asked hesitantly. His superior, Captain Tansur, did not mince words, shook his reptilian head. We have cross-verification from 3 satellites. This is real. Prep the intercept wing. Within moments, 2 Dominion corvettes blazed out of the station's docks. They moved in along a projected intercept line, searching high-intensity sweeps with no chance for stealth. This rendered 10 minutes of folks searching for warp trails on sensors. They hit upon a faint background noise, but no appreciable target. Then suddenly both corvettes reported weapons locks targeting them. All over comm channels, alarm klaxons screamed. Before Tansur could request details, communications went dead. The station's monitors swooped to the 2 blooming fireballs where the corvettes had been. The contact vanished again. The control room of the station fell into stunned silence. News of this bold skirmish traveled fast. Admiral Kirsith, a Dominion war hero who happened to be assigned to a posting in the nearby Gulfrex sector, dispatched an unaccompanied battle group, 3 cruisers and a destroyer, to intercept Station Kothar. They arrived to debris from the drifting corvette, no survivors. Furious, Kirsith insisted on flushing out the intruder whatever the cost. Patrol patterns doubled. Dozens of smaller craft and sensor probes dug through the local sublanes. But the Terran capital vessel shone uncanny cunning. Every time a Dominion squadron believed they had it cornered, only empty space or sensor ghosts awaited them. Using advanced sensor fooling arrays and short-burst microjumps, the HSS Indomitable slipped through. Sometimes it showed itself long enough to administer a crippling blow to a lone cruiser, then slipped into the star-dappled nothingness. The Dominion grew increasingly frustrated with each unsuccessful pursuit. The ship's AI, Cinder, an adaptive intelligence that processed tactical data at lightning speed, allowed Captain Yates to observe every Dominion response deep inside the Indomitable. Tension coiled on the dimly lit bridge. They knew they were facing hundreds to 1 odds. Their only advantage was their next-generation stealth drives, quantum lance weaponry, and a carefully charted course that took advantage of tiny holes in Dominion coverage. Tom was critical. The humans had one mission: get inside the exclusion zone core, and sabotage a new Dominion super relay in an operation dubbed Project Heliofocus. Dominion rumor said this gigantic station simply collected energy from stars to use in some unstoppable weapon or, at least, ensured total sensor coverage of the entire galaxy. If successful, there would be no more freedom on Earth, let alone for many lesser creatures. Where Heliofocus could make a difference, Yates wanted to destroy or disable the Dominion before it ever realized its full potential. A state of confusion at the Dominion's command chain grew into outright alarm. Admiral Kirsitha's optimism fell away with each passing hour. The search parties that set out returning disappointed, or worse, falling into ambushes. Other vessels reported high-energy, hull-penetrating beams that melted armor. Others described strange maneuverability from the Terran warship, outrunning Dominion interceptors with near-untraceable acceleration. As if to add insult to injury, the intruder rarely participated in full. It simply hit you, rendered you useless, vanished. Meanwhile, the Indomitable pushed deeper into the restricted space, directly toward Heliofocus's hidden coordinates. Dominion capital ships would sometimes try to create blockades at important choke points, but the Terran vessel discovered micro-warp corridors or used gravitational disturbances to navigate around them. Whisperers throughout Dominion territory began talking of a ghost ship, impervious in stealth and devastating in battle. As losses piled up, the Dominion High Command desperately attempted to reorganize. The Emperor's elite force, the Silver Talon Fleet, had rallied from Aeolian Prime under the command of Admiral Therix, a genius tactician of decades. So she knew brute force wouldn't work. Instead, she established sets of decoy sensor arrays. Crafting a corridor she was certain the Terran ships would follow. If any of the humans spotted an apparently ungarnered avenue, they would seize it, only to be assailed at the warpath's midway point by an entire dreadnought squadron. Captain Yates, however, was not unaware. The Indomitable's teams of infiltrators had learned about standard Dominion traps. Skurs showed worryingly light defenses in one corridor, which was an early red flag. A narrow gap near the Rashek Nebula was the Terran crew's chosen Deltrom Omicron to bypass those star systems. It was more dangerous for navigation, but less patrolled. Thus Admiral Therix's carefully laid trap snared nothing. For hours her fleet sat in ambush positions, scanning in frustration, while the Indomitable ghosted by dozens of light years away. Inside the containment area lay its most daunting challenge, the final approach to Heliofocus. This station, said to be close to a dense binary star system, was armed with every advanced sensor the Dominion knew of. The environment in itself was treacherous. Raging solar flares, gravitational currents, made stable flight difficult. Nevertheless, Captain Yates plowed on, conscious that the longer it took, the greater the chance of being spotted. If Heliofocus came online, Earth's chances of staying free vanquished. Heliofocus Station. Dominion scientists and engineers worked day and night on Heliofocus Station. They were on the verge of completion. The Terran incursion had reached them only in the form of half information, and they had dismissed the idea that a single warship could overcome such fortress-like fortifications. But a constant drip of rumors unnerved them. From time to time, an overwrought officer would barge in, panting with the latest figures of corvettes destroyed and cruisers ambushed. The station's director, a seemingly stoic figure called Herix Velsier, assured them that the station's local defenses were second to none. Any intruder would be disintegrated long before they got within spitting distance. On the Indomitable, tension mounted when a stealth failure momentarily left them vulnerable to a number of Dominion frigates. A bloody exchange broke out. Terran rail lances tore through two frigates as a third scarred the Indomitable's hull with a glancing plasma beam. Damage alarms flared. Captain Yates stiffened her voice. Engineering, seal that hull breach, fast. Navigation, keep our heading. We can't let them pin us down. In short order, the Terran's crew sealed off compartments, while Lieutenant Reyes, at navigation, made a micro-jump that put them behind the frigate formation. A second volley ended the battle. These near misses drained the Terran warship's resources. Shields had grown brittle from all the hits, and the jump drive had required constant recalibration to carry. Stealth jumps. The second-in-command, Commander Jiao, fretted that it was overstretching. Yates offered a grim smile. We're nearly there. One final push. As the Indomitable approached the heliofocus system, Dominion defenses prepared for the clash. The station's outer perimeter, surrounded by heavy turrets and drones, was poised to pulverize any intruder. On overwatching fire arcs, multiple capital ships, some of the Dominion's best, waited. If the Terran warship attempted a direct assault, they would crown it with unending barrages of unanswerable plasma fire. Morale soared among those defenders, certain that no vessel could cross. Little did they know how ingenious humans can be. Infiltration teams aboard the Indomitable succeeded in hacking into a local Dominion comm satellite, garnering the internals frequencies of the station. They found heliofocus vulnerable to a shield harmonics attack, which they could exploit from a particular vector. If the Terran ship was able to sneak up the angle, they could core a viral overload into the station's power grid, triggering a catastrophic meltdown. Thus was this final encounter fanned. Dominion turrets, capital ships, the station's watch in paranoid vigil. The Indomitable, bruised but unbowed, took to the skies in protest. If they get in the way of heliofocus, the Dominion's position of the strategic bargaining table would collapse like a house of cards, upending the entire dynamic of the galactic scenario. If they did not succeed, Terran hopes would die here, and Earth would know the Dominion's invincible rage. Across each Dominion channel the warning repeated, critical alert. Human warships spotted entering restricted space. Engage at once. But each effort only resulted in more chaos and a swelling wave of fear within the Empire's ranks. The Terrans would not be deterred, their hope and high technology and resolve driving them ever forward. The outcome was in the balance, an unpredictable clash between a lone, outgunned craft and an Empire's last citadel of defense. It was the day the HSS Indomitable came to face the massive ring of defenses surrounding Heliofocus Station. From a station in the midst of swirling solar dust near a binary star cluster, Yates stared at the station's sun-glare-shined outline on the main display. Covered by highly sophisticated energy fields and with a dozen of Dominion warships lining up beside it, Heliofocus seemed almost inaccessible. A few of the Terran crew could feel the burden all the lives their actions would impact. 3 dreadnoughts and 5 heavy cruisers of the Dominion fleet occupied orbit around the station, along with several destroyers, all bristling with plasma cannon. A series of ring-like platforms were dotted with automated turrets. On the other side, it had only one approach lane, flooding the area with direct fire, so no normal ship would survive. In the command center of the station, Director Kark Velsier brimmed with confidence as he checked the final adjustments of Heliofocus's core module. The station was just days from becoming fully operational. Yet their immediate task was simpler: incinerate any Terran craft that dared to approach. For the Terran perspective, the plan was approved. The Indomitable's boarders detected a low-key flaw in Heliofocus's shield harmonics. By injecting a specialized overload code into one particular subsystem, the station's main reactor could be put into meltdown. But to insert that code, the Indomitable had to get within a couple kilometers of the station's central ring, a region crawling with lethal defenses. A direct attack would be suicidal, unless they neutralized or distracted the perimeter ships. Captain Yates looked at her officers. We only get one shot. If we mess up the approach, the station's core will activate anytime now, giving them unparalleled strategic leverage. So we lure off their capital ships, sneak in under stealth, and then sabotage the station from point-blank range. Understood, Commander Jiao gasped. If we get pinned, then we risk the Indomitable's destruction. But we've come this far. Let's finish it. Phase 1 began. The Terran warship appeared from behind a mass of stellar debris along the edge of the system and fired a volley of long-range rail slugs at a Dominion dreadnought. The initial impact cut the dreadnought's shield projector. Dominion sensors flared with alarms screaming that the intruder had come. Under Admiral Therix's direction, the entire perimeter force had pivoted, converging on the Indomitable's coordinates. Plasma beams and torpedoes lanced through the void, requiring Yates to juke the dreadnought around in a series of twist-around, all but impossible maneuvers. With the Dominion capital ships closing in, the Indomitable deployed decoy drones carrying fake warp signatures. The illusions baited half a dozen Terran contacts, which resulted in half the perimeter garrison breaking toward the false targets on the screen. Uncertain as to which signals were real, Admiral Thurix ordered all ships to disperse, and the blockade, once solid, began to break apart as some captains pursued ghost signals and others sought to corral the real Indomitable. Exploiting the confusion, the Terran warship executed a micro-warp jump behind a ring platform. The station's turrets engaged, but the Indomitable had the ring's mass as cover, letting Dominion bolts rip into their own platform. The shield generators of the ring platform overloaded under the crossfire, detonating in a chain reaction that turned the dark to light. With no immediate reinforcements, the defenders in that sector buckled. Stage 2. The Indomitable shot ahead, zigzagging across the edge of another dreadnought's firing arcs. Ion bursts hummed from the Terran vessel and shorted the dreadnought's secondary batteries. A second rail slug crashed into the capital ship's engine block, leaving it drifting helplessly. Meanwhile, Dominion cruisers behind the Indomitable lagged behind, sending wave after wave of torpedoes to try to close in. The Terran ship's advanced jamming suite misdirected a large portion of them. The rest intercepted or deflected by precision point defense laser fire. The plasma bolts that penetrated pounded the Terran shields down to hair-raising levels, but each strike was survivable. Station Heliofocus saw the threat and fired its own monstrous beam cannons. Green needle-thin lances flashed out into the void, seeking the form of the Indomitable. Captain Yates timed erratic course changes, so only glancing hits seared the Terran hull. Each near miss shook the deck plates. The shield projectors were reporting partial meltdown alerts. The crew scrambled to maintain systems online. Most of Dominion, sending task forces to intercept the Indomitable across its overt vector, were on course, leaving a narrow corridor in the rear approach vector for the station itself. Sensing an opportunity, Yates activated the last gambit. The Indomitable went full stealth, disconnecting from sensors for a brief moment. Half blinded by decoys and ion storms, the Dominion capital ships lost track of the Terran craft's exact position. In that brief lull, the Indomitable darted towards Heliofocus's heart ring, keeping tight to the station's outer hull to avoid being picked up on distant sensor scans. Defensive turrets fired erratically, expecting a proximity detonation that failed to fulfill its mission, no accurate targeting. The underbelly of the Terran dreadnought scraped the docking pylons in a dangerous gliding pass. One miscalculation, and they'd crash into the station. Tension mounted on the Indomitable's bridge. Commander Zhao's knuckles turned white as she steered microthrusters with hairpin precision. Phase 3, the big sabotage. At exactly 800 meters from the core ring's node, the Terran infiltration program, inseminated into a specialized torpedo, fired from an auxiliary tube. It attached to an external data port on the station hull. Code flowed into Heliofocus's subgrid in seconds, slipping past the web of Dominion encryption like a ninja. Admiral Thurix, sensing a hack, initiated an immediate systems lockdown, but the incursion was far too fast. The meltdown code set off feedback loops in Heliofocus's main reactor. On the command deck of the station, Director Velsier came to a horrible realization. The invincible meltdown had already started. Alarms shrieked as power couplings overloaded, one after another. Arcs of plasmic discharge rippled around the whole core ring. The outside shields pulsed, then fell. Active defense turrets shut down or fired rogue. And the meltdown surged toward critical mass, threatening to explode the whole facility. Panic-stricken staff scrambled to begin emergency venting, but the infiltration code had disabled manual overrides. Feeling impending disaster, Dominion vessels around Heliofocus tried to retreat. Admiral Thurix's dreadnought made a final desperate strike towards the Terran warship, but the station's meltdown had produced violent surges of energy that broke his run. The Indomitable was caught up in the swirling chaos, rocked by stray blasts and debris from the station. Captain Yates had just a sliver of rueful optimism. Phase 4, Escape. Its battered warp drive engaged, the Indomitable dove for the stars as the station's formidable defenses fell behind in tatters. Another microjump took it clear of the station's immediate kill zone, as a chain reaction inside Heliofocus ignited a cataclysmic explosion. A wave of starbright energy burst from the station's core, engulfing entire segments of the ring in a churning inferno. Dominion capital ships that lingered too close found themselves buffeted by shock waves, their shields flattening by the onslaught. At the height of the mayhem, some of the ships spun out of control, crashing into each other. In the bright aftermath, Heliofocus swayed in half-ruin, half of its superstructure afire or drifting away. The meltdown had essentially nullified the station's strategic function. Dominion forces, battered and discombobulated, retreated to regroup, aware that the intruder could yet be lying in wait. The Indomitable, meanwhile, fled deeper into the star system's chaotic swirl, using forlorn pockets of radiation to cloak its final retreat. For all the Dominion's sleek technology and imposing numbers, they had been outsmarted. Not only had the Terran warship bypassed their most defensively protected territory, but its mission had been carried out with unnerving efficiency. Heliofocus was a shell lodged in smoldering ruin, months or years away from being actionable in any meaningful way. The advantage of the Empire, once irresistible, lay untended by a handful of enough brave humans. On the Indomitable's bridge, battered crew members cheered at the successful meltdown readouts. Her chest heaving with relief, Captain Yates sank into her command seat. The win was genuine, but its price had been demanded in blood. That ghostly systems of the Terran dreadnought blinked with PCS errors, an inch from potential fault collapse. The final sabotage almost pulled apart the Indomitable's warp drive, but they had survived. The existential threat that Heliofocus had represented to Earth, and likely the entire galaxy, was vanquished. There was shock across Dominion channels. Numerous vessels turned to come to the aid of survivors in the water. Admiral Thyrix, her once proud heritage sullied, sent angry and repeated orders for the Terran ship's annihilation, but her beleaguered fleets were in no condition to follow them. Some Dominion captains publicly wondered how an empire that seemed unstoppable could be humbled by a single outsider. Solemn message clattered from various outposts throughout the zone. Critical alert. Human warship escaped core space. Impossible. A new precedent was established in that moment. The Dominion's impregnable fortifications had been breached. The entire galaxy washed with mouths agape as the news spread. The humans had dared the unimaginable and prevailed. Heliofocus, the Empire's flagship, had been reduced to a smoldering ruin. The unassailable platform that maintained the Trelver exclusion zone for centuries faltered before Terran ingenuity. The Indomitable, bruised but victorious, faded into the cosmic darkness, returning to a Terran safe house beyond the Dominion's quick grasp. Its crew bore not only intelligence gathered through Heliofocus, but also an exulting message to Earth. The Dominion's once impermeable boundaries had been forever shattered. A single human warship had broken the illusions of the Empire's invulnerability. For days and weeks after the catastrophic sabotage of Heliofocus Station, the entire Aeolian Dominion was thrown into chaos. The Trelver exclusion zone, once an impenetrable safety net, was now a monument to a shameful defeat. Dominion admirals raced to patch together damaged capital ships, re-establish patrols, and salvage what was left of the station's tech. Emperor Halcyon publicly pooh-poohed the incident, claiming it was a simple terrorist act by a small band of rogues. But nobody really believed that. Across every star lane, the tale was the same. One human warship had pierced the depths of the Dominion's core and vaporized their prized superproject. The reverberations were felt well beyond Dominion borders. Smaller states no longer trembling in the shadow of unstoppable Dominion fleets were able to speak more confidently. Some withheld tribute, pointing to the Empire's failure to protect or enforce. Others reached toward Earth to forge new alliances, believing that humanity had now developed technologies or tactics that could tip the balance of power in the galaxy. A wave of uncertainty swept through every significant capital, from the backwater frontier trading posts to the gilded cosmic metropoles. On Earth, the infiltration success of the HSS Indomitable produced an outpouring of both relief and euphoria. For so long, Terran diplomats had cautiously skirted around the Dominion's maze of regulations, trying to prevent confrontation. Now, a few human officers had proven that even the greatest empire had cracks. In the quiet of Federation Council chambers, leaders debated how to capitalize on the newfound fame. Some called for immediate negotiations, hoping to turn the Dominion's shock into a formal peace that recognized Terran sovereignty. Some warned against the Empire in a corner, cautioning that it might strike out violently. As for the crew of the Indomitable, they returned to a secret shipyard in the star systems allied to Earth, where they were greeted as heroes. The ship itself had limped into dry dock, her hull scarred by plasma hits and the shield emitters burned out. But its mangled shape became a beacon of Terran resilience. Federation engineers clamored to examine the advanced stealth systems, quantum lances, and infiltration AI that had enabled the mission. Captain Yates, praised for her steady hand under tremendous pressure, was now at the center of a galactic conversation, and she stressed that victory was possible only thanks to the skill of the whole team: engineers, navigators, experts in infiltration, intelligence gatherers. Inside the Dominion, both Admiral Thurix and Admiral Kirsith were subjected to intense examination. Their fleets hadn't even stopped a single intruder, losing or damaging dozens of ships along the way. Meanwhile, thousands of Heliofocus employees demanded accountability. Why had the Empire depended so heavily on a station so susceptible to sabotage? In the Empire's highest councils, factions formed, some calling for immediate retaliation on Earth, others for better defenses, or even détente. The tide of unstoppable expansion the Dominion once reveled in no longer seemed so certain. But for all the Empire's strife within, the threat of a strike against Earth still loomed. The Terran Federation now knew they had won, but at a cost, and they scrambled to shore up important colonies and expedite new warship construction programs. Others who stayed neutral, however, started some quiet slow-burn aid of resources or advanced materials to help boost Earth against anticipated revenge. If the Dominion mounted a full-scale invasion, only a united front could defend against them. In cosmic bars and starport lounges, many a traveler shared the astounding news. One Terran warship slipped by ultimate Dominion and destroyed Heliofocus like a bolt from the blue, right in the heart of their Dominion. Some claimed it was an elaborate hoax or gross exaggeration, but the rapid meltdown and barrage of official Dominion damage control confirmed it. This was the combination of Terran trickery and technology that had broken the tacit prohibition against the Dominion being defeated on its own home turf. No one knew where it would lead, to temporary peace, all-out war, or something like a new age of multipolar power. But the galaxy had now learned that humanity was not naive nor impotent. They had taken the strongest fortress ring by direct defiance, undermining centuries of Dominion intimidation. From that point onward, every star nation changed the way they looked at Earth and Terran's ability to be audacious. For the crew of the Indomitable, the mission was more than a strategic coup. It was a renewal of human will, that they would not be subject to alien laws or dominated by mighty empires. At its heart, their infiltration and sabotage of Heliofocus was a proclamation that humanity was prepared to write its own destiny among the stars, beyond any line drawn by self-appointed brick walls. And so ended the incursion into the Trelver exclusion zone. Though the Indomitable faded from the map, lost in the depths of classified Terran space, its legend echoed for years. The Dominion, previously dominant in its limited capacity, was challenged to evolve or face the complete dissolution of its strength. In the meantime, Earth's star moved from overshadowed newcomer to respected, if not feared, player. And the last message, embedded in Dominion logs up for all time, was a cautionary lesson. Heavy alert. Human warship detected crossing into a void zone. It had been that one line to herald in a new era of galactic history, an era where the will of Terra showed that limits were meant to be tested, and when tested, broken.